Hey everybody, it is 9:15 a.m. Central Time, so you must be here for the CSLDallas Science of Mind class. Every week we come together, we open up the Science of Mind textbook, and we read and discuss and share examples and ask questions. My name is Tracy Brown, and I am so delighted to be with you this week as we dive into the practice of spiritual mind healing, which is in chapter 19. And we're going to be starting at the bottom of page 310, which is where we left off last week. Before we do that, however, I invite you to simply take a breath with me and know that this very moment and this very breath are both the perfect indicators that now is the time to study, explore, and expand our understanding of the science of mind principles. This is the perfect time. We are the perfect people, and so it is. Amen. So, bottom of page 310. In the chapter on the practice of spiritual mind healing, the Bible further explains to us the uses we can make of this power of the Word. It gives us the story of Adam and the Garden of Eden and the fall to show the wrong use. Then it gives us the story of Jesus, the Christ, and his spiritual teachings to show us the right use. And again, as in Adam all die, even so in Christ all are made alive. It says also that in the beginning God made man perfect, but man has sought out many inventions. It very boldly declares that death and resurrection are inventions of the human mind and not a decree of the Almighty. Referring to Adam and to Christ, the Bible says the first man is of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord from heaven. And when the disciples of Jesus asked him, quote, "What is God's relationship to the dead?" end quote, he replied, quote, "God is not a God of the dead, but of the living. For in his sight all are alive." In other words, the Bible clearly states that we are living in a spiritual universe governed by mental laws, that there is an action of consciousness as law upon substance, forever producing form and forever withdrawing from any particular form, thus producing another. That the form changes, but the formless never. Science tells us that all form comes from one substance, made manifest through vibration. This further helps us to see the relationship of the Word to the formless and teaches us the indestructibility and the eternality of energy and cosmic stuff. The coal and oil we burn today passed millions of years ago from one form into another, and now, as they burn, are passing back into energy again. Nothing has happened to the energy except that it was temporarily imprisoned, that in its release and explosion, it might produce heat and energy for utilitarian purposes, but nothing has happened to it. The great souls give us this spiritual consciousness 5,000 years ago, but it was hard to make us believe it. They have had to remain in the background until science at last resolves the physical universe into that, not vacuum, but that substance, indefinable and indivisible, which men like Socrates announced, and upon which conclusions men like Jesus based their whole system of thought and method of procedure. Okay, so I'm going to take a breath there because I know some of you got lost wading through Ernest Holmes dissecting or deconstructing what is in the Bible. So if you are challenged by reading the Bible and then taking or understanding the metaphysical interpretation of it, then that was challenging for you. If you love the Bible and the message of the Bible and have some skill or experience looking at it from a metaphysical perspective, then you were reading along or listening along and going, that's right, that's what it means. So remember, this chapter is focused on what is spiritual mind healing all about. What are we talking about when we're talking about spiritual mind treatment? Treating whatever the condition is using mental law and using spiritual principle. At the beginning of the chapter, Ernest Holmes reminds us that there is perfect God, perfect man, perfect being. That this is the way that life has been created, that there is a perfection in God. God makes form from itself, so humanity is designed from the perfection of God and in itself is perfect, and life, right, perfect being, the experience of life is perfectly unfolding. And when we are doing treatment, we are doing it or speaking it or writing it from the place of understanding that there's only one thing happening here, right? And that is that God is creating and co-creating life with us, through us, as us. So in this section, from the bottom of 310 to near the bottom of 311, Ernest Holmes is just bringing forward the connection between this metaphysical, beyond the form, interpretation and use of the law, and saying, yes, this was in the Bible too, and here's how you can understand what it means to speak your word from a place of faith and belief in the one source that is formless. He also in this section reminds us that, right, we know about quantum physics, and the quantum physicists and scientists have basically said the same thing. All form, all matter comes from one substance. It's just rearranged in different forms, different density, different vibration in order for us to have a physical experience of it. This is a case of science catching up to the soul, right? To what the prophets from many, many different faith paths explained from a theological perspective centuries ago. But in our humanity, we are constantly studying our environment and making sense of it. So our scientists have basically corroborated what was written in the Bible, what mystics from many different traditions have already defined, that there is one spiritual source. There is one source that is invisible, and it creates life from itself. Take a deep breath. And I'm going to keep reading. So, and then after I read a little bit more, I am really curious about what questions you have or how you would put this in your own words if you were explaining it to a family member or a friend. So let's keep going. In the last paragraph on page 311, we are not denying the physical universe when we seek to explain it. Physical form is real. And if it were not for form, God or intelligence would not be expressed. But right here, students are puzzled when we say that God does know form but not size. As Emerson said, there is no great and there is no small to the soul that maketh all. And whence it cometh, all things are, and it cometh everywhere. So as far as the law is concerned, it does not know anything about big and little. Someone will at once say, if God knows anything, God knows big and little. God cannot know anything which is contradictory to the divine being. It's impossible for the infinite to know that which is finite. The superlative cannot be the comparative. This does not mean God cannot know the mountain and the molehill. We have tried to make it plain that God knows form, but not size. He knows both the mountain and the molehill, but not as big and little. The infinite knows experience, but not duration. Anything that spirit knows is, because its being passes into becoming through its self-knowing. Okay, now I'm going to stop because, boom, close the book. This is so rich. And if it's confusing to you, then I really, really want you to put a question in the chat or raise your hand and ask the question. Because as Ernest Holmes describes, understanding this is so important to understanding when you pray what you are doing and how you are positioning your request as a claim on the universe, directing universal energy, which is invisible, toward a specific outcome. And he reminds us that unlike the human brain that tries to think of a time, or does think in a time and space continuum and thinks in big or small, Spirit, God, just simply thinks in delivering the form. So it is true in the human physicality, a mountain is tall, big, takes a lot of space, and a molehill is small, doesn't take up a lot of space. But that is just the essence of the perfect molehill. That is just the essence of the perfect mountain, that which is a name that we have given something, a mountain. But it's not because in the creation of that mountain, the universe or universal law is saying, we need to make something really big. I think we'll call it a mountain. All right. So, Ryan, I know there have got to be some questions out there or some other ways that people have found it to make sense for them. So, in case we have someone who, or a few people who are with us for the first time, tell them how they can participate.
Absolutely, and thank you, Dr. Tracy Brown, and welcome to everybody who is watching us today here in the Zoom room or on Facebook Live. And you're absolutely right. This is our interactive portion of today's conversation, and so we want to hear from you. And there's a couple of different ways you can do that. If you're here in the Zoom room with us, we encourage you to hit the raise your hand icon located somewhere down there below, either under more or Zoom makes a lot of crazy updates, right? And if you're out there on Facebook Live, you can also put your questions, comments, experiences inside of the comments field, and we'll bring those in the room. And as I always mention, we do want to keep this anonymous, so that way we have a sacred space for you to be able to talk with us. And yeah, as folks are getting ready to raise their hand here in the Zoom room, one of the comments that I did see that came across that kind of comes from my good friend Bobby, who's also my co-t-shirt maker here. And this is another t-shirt I think we could use. It says, "The infinite doesn't judge, big and small, good and bad. No comparisons."
Yes. And why would the infinite make a comparison? Everything it creates is perfect. There's nothing to compare. So I love that. I love that. And yeah, I think we're going to have to set Bobby up as our official t-shirt designer.
Absolutely. We'll have to make an Etsy account. All right, so I'm going to call into the room Dennis. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Dennis?
Good morning, everyone. I thought I would just share, okay, I've been studying this science mind almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years next month, and it took me quite a while to grasp this big versus little thing.
Yes.
What first thing is, there's a line here that, I've had highlighted for quite some time, but anyway, you read it, but it is impossible for the infinite to know that which is finite. Just contemplate that, everybody. And something I've become very conscious of, I think it was Reverend Petra, was in some class, but no, when she was explaining this, and then what worked for me was when she said, there's no more life in an elephant than there is in an ant. Life is life. And I have become, over the years, so conscious of that. When I see a little housefly, I go, life. It's just life. And what holds, and I've come to understand, I'm the one that has this issue with big and small.
Yes.
I have to, if I want more of something, then I have learned I have to grow my mental equivalence and my beliefs to that larger size. It's there.
Absolutely. Life is life. And the consciousness, there's a chapter in Living the Science of Mind. It might be my favorite chapter. I don't know for sure, but it's definitely in my top 10 in Living the Science of Mind. And it is all about setting up and expanding your receiving center. So Dennis, you're absolutely right. It's not that the universe is saying you can have a little or you can have a lot. It is our own mental equivalent and our own belief about what is appropriate and what is our desire and what we can have that puts limits on the expression of it. So you are so right. And thank you for quoting again that one line about reminding us, how can the infinite be or think about something in a finite way? It is illogical. So beautiful, Dennis. Thank you so much. Ryan.
Yes, Dr. Tracy. Yeah, I was really just kind of listening to your explanation of it. It was really great. All right, so I want to go ahead and call Connie into the room. Connie, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Good morning, Dr. Tracy.
Good morning, Connie.
Good to see you. I recently came across a quote by the Dalai Lama. Love is the absence of judgment. And I made a huge, I printed it up, I stick it on my door when I go out the door. I've got to rewire my brain to accept that, because it was wired in at such an early age. My parents were very judgmental about politics. They were ultra liberal. They were right. The other guys were wrong. They were good. The other guys were bad, And we all got it. All three of us, my two brothers and I, we got this polarization, or I don't know what you call it, good, bad, right, wrong, all that. And so I'm working on it. And CSLDallas is helping me immensely. So
Love Love is the absence of judgment. Wow. You know, a few years ago, my theme for the year was living in answered prayer. And my personal theme was living in answered prayer. And I challenged myself to, every day, several times a day during the first quarter, to look around and notice, like consciously notice, the people and the things, the animals, the nature, the weather, everything, and just start asking myself, how is this answered prayer? And what that did was remind me of what that Dalai Lama quote, which I wasn't familiar with, but it made me realize everything is happening the way it's supposed to. A lot of things that I say and a lot of things I believe, right? Everything is good. All life has a purpose. All of the things that we teach, but recognizing it as an answer to a prayer really helped me release some of my judgment, some of my attachment to things being a certain way, because it wasn't just about, was it an answer to my prayer? It was that everything and everyone and everything that's happening is a method or pathway, right, to answer someone's prayer, even if they're not, getting on their knees or putting their hands together or bowing their heads or closing their eyes, right? Everything that we say and everything that we say over and over is really a prayer. So you just reminded me of that this releasing judgment is love. And in the context of this chapter about spiritual mind healing, we are not comparing things. We are simply describing clearly what it is we want to have, experience, or be. And there is no judgment about that from Spirit, so why do I have a judgment about it? So thanks, Connie. Lots to think about that there, and I think that quote is one that I want to remember and use this week coming up. Do we have anything else, Ryan?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring into this nice statement that came through the chat, which says, Emerson says, only the finite has wrought and suffered. The infinite lies in stretch and smiling repose. And so they bring up, so why would the infinite know finite? I think that's a good statement in it. And it's one of my favorite quotes as well, too, from Emerson.
Absolutely. That is one of our favorite quotes. And it just brings it home again. The infinite cannot know anything as finite.
Yeah, and so one of the questions that's come through is, it says, I'm wary of dealing with the mechanisms of the human experience. Can you suggest a spiritual practice to be able to step back and see the broader picture?
Ooh, lovely. So while I put my brain on the task of choosing a spiritual practice, I want to also comment about the being weary. Being human is not easy. And at the same time, that's what we're here to do while we are in this form. So when I am beginning to feel weary, tired, frustrated, even though I know it's it's all a part of the human experience. And I have been created in this form as human to have a human experience. But I remember always, my spiritual practice is not to escape humanity. It's not. Spiritual practice, understanding spiritual principle, committing to living life grounded and in alignment with spiritual law, it's not to escape humanity. It is to navigate humanity. So that's really important, because when we think of it the other way around, I'll just leave this human stuff behind. I'm going to go into spiritual practice and go into the perfection of my divine life, my divinity. We're doing spiritual bypass when we do that. So spiritual practice that aligns us with the spiritual truth is simply to give us the power, the wisdom, the clarity, the joy to be able to navigate whatever is going on in our human experience. So to the question of ideas or suggestions about spiritual practice, I'm going to give a couple different ones because different things resonate with different people. So if you are someone who loves guided meditation, then I would absolutely go to one of the meditation apps, and I would put in, a request for meditation on a specific subject, whatever is creating the stress or the exhaustion. If there's been a lot going on with my family and relationships in my family, right? I might go to one of the meditation apps and go and put in a guided meditation for family or relationships or communication, depending on what it is that's driving it. So guided meditation is really good, because if you're in a place where you are already, if I am in a place where I am already feeling frustrated or weary or exhausted, I may not be grounded enough to simply go into the silence, because my brain might be clicking on all the things that I'm frustrated about. So guided meditation is really helpful. Another spiritual practice that's really helpful is really seeking help and guidance. And so that would be a perfect time to set an appointment with a licensed practitioner, or to connect with someone you've taken classes with and just ask them to spend 30 or 40 minutes and let you talk about it. But your goal is to get back into alignment with spiritual truth, like your spiritual way of being. A third spiritual practice that comes to mind in a case like that or a situation like that is to do something physical. Often when we get weary of our human frustrations and challenges, we are mentally, emotionally, and physically tired. And what we want to do is we want to crawl up in the bed or lay on the couch and wrap up in a blanket, and we want to nap or sleep and just kind of veg out. That's a perfect time to get out and take a walk outside. Not just exercise like go to the gym, but really do something outside that's physical, that will get you back connected to nature. Go to a park, go to the Dallas Arboretum, or if you're not in Dallas and there's an arboretum or botanical garden, like go and look at all the beautiful plants and flowers and be reminded that the same source that created that beauty created you as part of the beauty of a species called humanity. So those three things come to mind right away. And then the fourth one that won't let me stop without mentioning it is simply the mantra, there's only one life. That life is God. God's life is perfect. God's life is my life now. Repeat it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, over and over. There's only one life. That life is God. God's life is perfect. God's life is my life now. There's only one life. That life is God. God's life is perfect. God's life is my life now. So those are the four things that come. Those are four of the things that come to mind. There's another half dozen, but I'm going to stop there. Ryan, do we have anything else?
Yeah, for me, Tracy, it's looking through a telescope and just being able to see outer space and the moon. And you think about how small we are in this spectrum called life. And so it just amazes me.
Yes.
But it looks like we have somebody who wants to join us. And I encourage anybody else out there, please share your questions or comments. We really love to hear from you and to know your experiences with this. And with that being said, Brenda, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Good morning, Dr. Tracy, family, community. What an awesome, incredible conversation today. And I'm going to draw the last you said, the first you said, and oh, Connie, what a great quote. Anyway, I need to bring it down really earthy in my baby beginning. And when I first came to Science of Mind, I came in with great anger and resentment and isolation that, yes, there was this great God divine and everything out there was perfect. And in this giant, huge bubble, except this little side bubble of Brenda that didn't fit in. And that the vast majority of the world in my life's experience had been raised and comfortable with the Christ mythos. And coming from a non-Christian tradition, being a extremely small religious minority in a very small town in the Midwest, I had quite a bit of armor. So when I came to Science of Mind and heard that everything is God's life and God's life is my life, I had a glitch there. And I also had a glitch when the infinite can't understand the finite, but the finite can't understand the infinite, but I'm trying to bridge this human spiritual awareness. And so what helped me, I remember the exact day I finally fell into place. I was driving on George Bush. It was something Reverend Karen had said in one of her Sunday celebrations. And my scientist, E equals MC squared, energy, matter, it all converts, But where's my place in that? Because if it all converts, then I'm part of that energy. But then why did Jesus had to come? Because if God is one, then, so I made myself crazy and it hit me. Our human brain cannot comprehend energy, matter, transformation with the maintenance of our consciousness and our sense of identity of our experiences. And so energy condensed down to the physicality of the great teacher Jesus, showing us energy into matter. He leaves this earthly plane, matter goes back to energy, and our human mind says, okay, that's it. And energy comes back in a recognizable form in multiple experiences, multiple times, through many, many years to remind us that energy matter happens and we are part of it. And therefore, if energy matter transfer happens and divine reminds us of that, that's when I plugged in from my little separate circle into the all. And that's when it finally went back to the sentence before you started. Gradually, a conviction dawns that God is all there is. And as this conviction grows, the work is done more easily with a greater degree of acceptance. And when I stopped fighting the resistance of my being here and the resistance to why it had to make sense and how, and finally stepped into, I am just matter, energy, matter, energy, matter, energy. And it makes a lot of the stuff in my head, many of the spiritual traditions I've studied help. And when I get stuck in my humanness, one of my meditative practices is if I can shift into a different energetic form of visualization. I love Ryan's telescope. I go out and look at the Earth from a few galaxies away, or I go into the atom to a subatomic particle and look up thinking I'm Horton Hears a Who, which is a great spiritual book, by the way. And so for me, taking this great heady mental discussion, which I love, and translating how did I get out of a hole of hurt in my heart, I did it through finally blending the science and the knowing that I and God and you and everyone else and every flower and tree is just matter, energy, matter, energy. Thank you.
Okay, like we could just shut down right now. Like you just got the teaching of the teaching from the teacher. Oh, Brenda, that was so beautiful. And if that was helpful for you, if Brenda's explanation and her sharing was helpful for you, put that in the comments, put that in the chat. Like, how was that helpful? Or yes, that makes sense, because it is exactly what we are talking about on several different levels. And one of the reasons we teach that Jesus was the example, not the exception, is because exactly what Brenda, what you shared, that if we look at the experience of Jesus as an example of how the infinite takes form in a human being, then we can understand that the infinite is taking form in, as and through each one of us. And then it's all about our choices and the way we think about things and how we navigate the world. And it's not like during the times that Jesus lived, everything was all easy and sweet and without judgment, right? Jesus actually gives us the example of how to be love and choose love and represent love and every other spiritual quality in the environment where you are not necessarily accepted or understood. The humanest of all human experiences. And the return to energy, from matter to energy, right? We have all kinds of rituals related to that. So the example, not the exception. And everything else that you shared there was so beautiful. So many people really get an understanding of the metaphysics through science of mind because it is about the science. So science of mind and spirit, and we teach spiritual laws, but it's so easy and applicable to the science. Like it's repeatable, it's describable, and these are universal spiritual laws at work, and this is how they show up in the physical. So anybody else that has a question or a comment, we've got just a few more minutes, probably time for one more. So Ryan, would you check to see if we have anyone else who wants to jump in?
Well, I'm seeing a lot of great comments like hi, hello, and where people are checking in. But I'm really interested to dive a little bit further in the book. Do you want to just maybe read a few more lines?
Sure, if I can remember where I stopped. Let's see.
Oh, it looks like we do have somebody who wants to speak. Do you want to go ahead and find your place as they ask their question or comment?
Uh-huh.
All right, I'm going to call into the room Anita.
Right
Anita, you
there.
want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hey, good morning, Ryan and Dr. Tracy.
Good morning.
Everybody else. I'm just listening to the comments and was looking back at some of what you read this morning, Dr. Tracy, about going back to scripture and Jesus being that example of how to live. But it's in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made flesh, and the Word was God. So, taking that up in the human form as the example that Jesus provided. I looked into that because you asked about how would you explain it. And for me, taking up in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, I am, because as already expressed, we are part of that same God stuff that everything is sourced from. And so I am, and my word is made power by that surrendering to that one source. And so everything that I speak forth, then through that power, through that understanding that it's all pure energy, that it's all pure love, all of that comes forth into manifest form, whether big or small, great, big, doesn't matter, except all in the mental equivalent that Dennis spoke about within our own thought processes of what our experience we want to see. We can bring forth our word through the law and have it made manifest. So there's my ramblings for the morning.
And beautiful ramblings they are. Thank you. Last week, reading from the first part of this chapter, Ernest Holmes also does a beautiful job of using that section, the word, right, and referring to the word, and in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God. It's really surprising to me sometimes how many people think I'll be in Science of Mind and then I just won't have to think about the Bible anymore. But Ernest Holmes really helps us understand the Bible from a metaphysical perspective. And Anita, thank you for making that connection between the comments that have been made and what we're talking about in this chapter. Anita and Brenda and Connie and Dennis, thank you so much for contributing to the wisdom that's shared in this class today and every week. For everybody who is with us this morning, or if you're listening to watching the recording, we do this every Sunday morning, 9:15 a.m. Central Time, diving into the Science of Mind textbook. And we simply go through in order because for all of us, the more we dive in, the more we take it in, the more we consider, what does that really mean? The more we can apply it in our everyday lives. And that's what's so important to me. So this week, go out and apply this concept and look around you and realize that you have the power to speak your word. And next week, come back and we'll talk more about the principles of spiritual mind healing as described by Ernest Holmes. That's all our time for this week. See you next time.